Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reading the fifth chapter of Emperor's Ring. That night after dinner, Feluda said suddenly, Topsy, what do you make of all this? All what? Everything that's happening so far. Why, you should know, you're the detective. Besides, how can I draw any conclusions until we find out who that sannyasi was? But surely, certain things are quite clear. For instance, the fact that the sannyasi went into bathroom and didn't come out. Now, that is pretty revealing, isn't it? What does it reveal? Can't you figure that out? Well, all it can mean is that the chowkidar wasn't paying enough attention. No, no, you ass. What then? If the sannyasi had indeed come out, the chowkidar would definitely have seen him. You mean he never did? Do you remember what he was carrying? Look, I wasn't. Oh, yes, he had a small attache case. Have you ever seen a sannyasi with an attache case, like a business briefcase? No, can't say I have. Well, I think that's distinctly suspicious. What do you suspect? That sannyasi was no more than a non sannyasi, just like you and me. His normal clothes were in that case. The saffron robe was a disguise. Possibly the beard was false too. Oh, I see. You mean he changed into different clothes, stuffed his robe into the case, and came out looking totally different? No wonder the chowkidar couldn't recognize him. Yes, now we are talking. But who threw that piece of paper at you? Either the fake sannyasi himself or one of his men. He must have heard us making enquiries at the station, so he decided to give us a warning. All right, but are there any more mysteries? There is no end to them, my boy. Who followed Dr. Srivastava in that black car? Who was watching us from the gate, smoking a charminar and chewing a pan? Was it the same sannyasi? Or was it someone else? What spy did Pyarelal talk about? Why does Bono Bihari Babu keep wild animals in his house? Where had Mahabir seen Bono Bihari Babu before? How much does he know about the ring? I lay awake that night thinking these things over. Feluda was scribbling something in his blue notebook. Then he put it away and went to bed at 10:30. Soon he was fast asleep. Drums beat in the distance. Oh, yes, Ram Leela. I heard an animal at some stage. It might have been a dog or a jackal, but it sounded like a hyena. Why was Feluda puzzled by Bono Bihari Babu's wild animals? One didn't have to do things for a specific reason, did one? People had strange hobbies, so perhaps keeping wild animals was just a hobby for him. It's difficult to tell when I fell asleep, nor can I tell what woke me. It was still dark, and everything was very quiet. The drums were silent, as were the animals. All I could hear was Feluda breathing heavily in his sleep next to me, and the alarm clock ticking behind my head. Then my eyes fell on the window. Normally, I could see a far bit of the starry sky through the open window. Tonight, something blocked most of it. As the last remnants of my sleep cleared from my eyes, I realized with a shock what it was. A man was standing outside the window, holding its bars and staring into our room. My heart stood still. Yet, I couldn't take my eyes off that figure. The room was utterly dark, and the starlight outside was not good enough to see the man's face. But I could make out that the lower half of his face was covered by a dark cloth. Now, he put a hand through the bars in the window. But no, it wasn't just his hand. He was holding a rod. A sweet, yet strong smell hit my nostrils. I was already breathless with fear. Now, my limbs began to go numb. I tried to muster all my willpower. Then, slowly, without moving my body, I stretched out my left arm towards Feluda. He was still asleep. My eyes hadn't moved from the window. The man was still holding the rod, and the smell was getting stronger. I began to feel giddy. At this moment, my hand brushed against Feluda's waist. I gave him a nudge. Feluda moved slightly, and his bed creaked noisily with the movement. In that instant, the man vanished from the window. Why are you poking at me? Asked Feluda sleepily. I swallowed and tried to speak. Window, I managed. What about the window? Whose God? What's that smell? Fully awake, Feluda jumped up and ran to the window. He stayed out of it for a few moments, then returned back to me. Tell me exactly what you saw. I was still finding difficult to talk. A man with a rod inside. Did he stretch the rod out into our room? Yes, I see. He must have had chloroform dabbed on the rod. He wanted us to faint. But why? It could be a different thief. Maybe he thought that the ring was still in our house. Never mind. Go back to sleep now. And please don't tell your father or Diru Kaka about this. They'll only get nervous and spoil all my work. The next morning, both Baba and Diru Kaka appeared more relaxed. The police had been informed, and Inspector Gargari had already started working on the case. So it wasn't likely that there would be any further problem. I sent up a silent prayer for Feluda. Dear God, don't let the police win. Let it be Feluda who finds the ring. May the full credit go to him, not the police. Baba said, I'm thinking of taking you out today to a few other places. We decided to leave after lunch, but before a final decision could be taken on where we should go, Bono Bihari Babu turned up at the house. It was he who eventually settled the matter. I had come when I heard of the daylight robbery, he said. If only you had a hound, Deru Babu, this wouldn't have happened. A well trained pedigree hound would have taken just 5 seconds to figure out what the sadhu's intentions were. But what's the use of offering you advice now? The damage is done. Never mind. Have one of these, he added, unwrapping the small packet he was carrying. These are the best pan in Lucknow. Banaras is the only other place where you can find such good quality pan. I began to feel slight uneasy. If Bono Bihari Babu stayed for too long, our plans for the afternoon would be spoilt. But he asked at this point, Are you planning to go out or will you stay in? Baba said, Well, these fellows haven't seen anything except the Imambara. So I was thinking of taking them somewhere else. Haven't you seen the residency? Bono Bihari Babu asked me. I shook my head. Then allow me to show it to you. You won't find a guide like me. I have a thorough knowledge of the mutiny. Then he turned to Dhiru Kaka and said, There is only one thing I'm feeling curious about. Where did you keep the ring? In a chest? No, I haven't got one in my house. The thief took it from my Godrej Almara. The key, of course, was in my pocket. He must have used a duplicate. I believe he left the box behind. Yes. Very strange. Was the box in a drawer? Yes. And you searched the drawer thoroughly, I presume. Every inch of it. You could check for fingerprints, couldn't you? I mean, on the handle of the Almara and that little box. That wouldn't help. Both are full of my own fingerprints. Bono Bihari Babu shook his head and said, Pyarelal was a strange man. He didn't even bother to have the ring insured. And the person he gave it to was just as foolish. However, I hope he has now learned a lesson. We didn't get the chance to take a tonga this time. All of us got into Bono Bihari Babu's car. Feluda and I sat in the front. As we were passing through the Clive Road, Bono Bihari Babu asked us, Did you ever think you would get involved in such mysterious event in Lucknow? I shook my head, and Feluda smiled. Baba spoke for him. Felu is thrilled to be here, he said, because he is very interested in such things. He is an amateur detective, you see. Indeed. Bono Bihari Babu sounded both surprised and pleased. It's an excellent way of exercising the brain. Well, Felu Babu, how far have you got? I have only started. I don't know what you would call a mystery, but certainly I am mystified by many things. What do you mean? Asked Dhiru Kaka. Well, how do you suppose that sannyasi got hold of a duplicate key? Besides, your house wasn't totally empty. How could he go into your bedroom knowing that the bearer and the cook were in the house? In any case, one little thing has always worried me. What is that? Did Pyarelal really give that ring to Dr. Srivastava? Or did Sri. What are you saying, Bono Bihari Babu? Surely you don't suspect poor Srivastava? Why not? Everyone is under the suspicion until this matter gets cleared up, and that includes you and me. Isn't that right, Felu Babu? Certainly. We must forget that Dr. Srivastava and the sadhu both had gone to our house that evening, said Feluda. Exactly. Bono Bihari Babu seemed to grow positively excited. Baba spoke a little haltingly. But if Srivastava had indeed used unfair means to get hold of that ring, why should he give it to us for safekeeping? And then, why should he steal it again? Bono Bihari Babu laughed out loud. That is simple. His house was burgled, so he got frightened and passed the ring on to you. But temptation didn't leave him, so he stole it back, fooled the real thief, and killed two birds with one stone. I began to feel quite confused. How could an amiable gentleman like Srivastava be a thief? Was Feluda in agreement with what had just been said? Or had his suspicion fallen on Dr. Srivastava only after Bono Bihari Babu began speaking? In fact, he hadn't finished. Srivastava is a nice man, I agree, Bono Bihari Babu went on. But just think for a minute. He's built his own house, stuffed it with expensive furniture, and he certainly lives in a style. Now, how could he have done that? I mean, how much does he earn as an osteopath in a small town like Lucknow? Dhiru Kaka said, Who knows? Perhaps his father left him some money. No, his father was just a clerk in a post office in Allahabad. At this point, Feluda suddenly asked something completely irrelevant. Have you ever been bitten by any of your animals? No, never. What is that mark on your right wrist? Oh, ho, ho. You do have sharp eyes, I must say. That mark normally stays hidden under my sleeve. It's the result of fencing. My opponent's sword scratched my wrist. The residency was really worth seeing. It was a beautiful place. There were trees everywhere, and amidst of them, a few broken old British houses, all built in the mid 19th century. On the trees sat a large group of monkeys. Lucknow, I had heard, was well known for its monkeys. Now I could see for myself what these creatures could get up to. A few street urchins were firing stones at the monkeys from their catapults. Bonobihari Babu went across and gave them a nasty earful. Then he returned to us and said, I cannot stand cruelty to animals. Unfortunately, there is plenty of it to be seen in our country. I had read about the Sepoy Mutiny. Going through the residency made those events pass through my mind like pictures on a screen. Bono Bihari Babu, in the meantime, had begun his commentary. During the time of the mutiny, Lucknow was ruled by the Nawab. The British forces were all stationed in the residency here. Henry Lawrence was their commander in chief. When trouble started, most of the other British men and women in Lucknow went and took refuge in a hospital. Sir Henry fought bravely, but was eventually killed by sepoys. What happened to the British after that is obvious from the state of this building. If Sir Colin Campbell hadn't arrived with reinforcements, heaven knows what greater horrors the British in Lucknow would have endured. This was their billiard room. Just look at what those cannonballs did to it. Baba and Deru Kaka had gone for a walk since they had both seen residency before. Only Feluda and I were inside, totally engrossed in what Bono Bihari Babu was saying, and looking at the remains of the broken buildings, all built 200 years ago. Suddenly, through a hole in the wall, something came flying in. It shot past Feluda's ear, bumped against the opposite wall, and fell on the ground with a thud. It turned out to be a stone. In the next instant, I saw Bono Bihari Babu pull Feluda sharply to one side just as another stone came in and fell on the floor. There was no doubt that both had been thrown with a catapult. Bono Bihari Babu, despite his age, moved with remarkable agility. He jumped through a bigger gap in the wall and landed on the grass outside. Feluda and I joined him almost immediately. We all saw a bearded man running away. He was wearing a black coat and a red fez cap. Feluda rose to his feet without a word, ran after him. I was about to follow, but Bono Bihari Babu pulled me back, saying, You're still only a schoolboy, Tapesh. It's better that you stay out of this. Feluda returned in few minutes. Did you catch him? Asked Bono Bihari Babu. No, said Feluda. I was too far behind. He got into a black standard car and fled. Scoundrel, Bono Bihari Babu muttered. Come on now, we'd better get out of here. A little later, we met Baba and Diru Kaka. Why are you panting, Felu? Baba asked. Perhaps he should give up being a detective, said Bono Bihari Babu. I think a gunda's after him. Both Baba and Diru Kaka began to look rather alarmed when they heard our story. But in the end, Bono Bihari Babu laughed. Don't look worried, he said. I was only joking. Those stones were actually meant for me, not Felu. Didn't you see me yell at those boys? It was simply their way of paying me back. Then he turned to Feluda and said, "Even so, Felu, I would say that you really must be more careful. After all, you are young and new to this place. Why get involved in something that doesn't concern you?" Feluda remained silent. We began walking into the car. Was it really him they were trying to hit, or was it you? I whispered to Feluda. Do you think he'd have taken it so quietly if he was their target? Wouldn't he have screamed the roof down, or what's left of it? I agree with you, but I have got hold of one little thing. That man dropped it. Feluda took out a small black object from his pocket. It was a false mustache. One side of it still showed traces of gum. He put it back in his pocket and said, Bono Bihari Babu knows very well those stones had been thrown at me. Then why did he say so? Well, either because he didn't want us to get worried, or what? Feluda didn't reply. Instead, he inclined his head, snapped his fingers, and said, The plot gets thicker and thicker, Tapshi. You're not to disturb me at all. He didn't speak to me again that day. On returning home, he spent most of his time either pacing up and down in the garden or scribbling in his blue notebook. I took a quick look at what he had written when he went out into the garden, but I couldn't read a single word, for the script used was something I have never seen before. And that is the end of the chapter 5. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. See you all in the next video.